Ryan Dittrick and I on the cold frozen lakes of Banff, Alberta, talking about the walk in the Saddle Dome. And coming live from Calgary is Ryan Dittrick from his own home studio. Dittrick, how's it going,
Right.
man?
It's going pretty good. How about you, Jeff?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for hanging out and coming on the show.
Wow, I had to squeeze it in. Tonight's 12:60 movie night, right? So you got to try and find the time where you get it. I didn't. Notting Hill, not for me. I did do Super Bad a couple. I think that was like 10 days ago. But yeah, the rom coms, kind of like Tom. That's not my style. Maybe I'll tune in
Right,
a little bit later. We'll see.
right. So, I mean, apart from the 1260 movie nights, what else have you been squeezing in on your schedule in self isolation during this COVID-19 crisis?
I mean, I'd like to say a lot, but certainly it's been a little different from our usual schedule. You know what it's like, right? Normally, every second night you're out until 11 p.m. or midnight working, and all of a sudden from 5 p.m. onwards, now I have all this time that I don't know what to do with myself, really. So, getting caught up on some TV shows. Big Better Call Saul guy. I like Homeland. I haven't started any of those seasons yet. Of course, Tiger King. I've got to finish that tonight at some point, but. Outside of that, I've got two more episodes left. I mean, outside of that, it's been, to be honest with you, it hasn't been very quiet at work. We're still, creating plans. Obviously, a lot of uncertainty. We don't know whether, even when we're writing a story, do we use past tense or present tense when we're referring to a player's
Right.
season or the season as a whole. So that adds some different complications, but it's forcing us to get creative and a lot of meetings right now, but we're figuring it out slowly but surely.
So, I talked to Tom about binge watching shows. I myself hopped on the Tiger King bandwagon, and yeah, I believe you've been to OKC as well, so you
Yeah.
kind of have some familiarity with ties of just kind of maybe the people down there. I don't know.
Well, kind of like both of you, I don't remember seeing Joe Exotic, but yeah, it's true that like there is stuff like that around. So you go for a drive and it doesn't seem too out of place. It's kind of like going to Nashville and seeing a billboard for boot deals. It's kind of just part of the regular lifestyle. So
Right.
you know what? I do hope to go back at some point. I love Oklahoma City. Every time I went there, and I went fairly often and covered a deep playoff run, which we might get to a little bit later. So much fun. The people there are great. I love it. I think I often said I would like a chance to maybe work there or live there one day because it's just such a good community. And hey, I guess you start to think about those things nowadays because it's all about unity and community right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my one trip to OKC was with Chris Westcott, so he definitely OKC native. I would call him a native. I think he was born and
Yeah.
raised in Buffalo, New York, but I think he calls OKC home a little bit too. Uh, he definitely showed me the OKC hospitality. So you're right. It's a great part of the world. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, we've been binge watching that as well. I think I finished the season. So yeah, interesting stuff. Perfect timing for that series because no one else has anything
Oh,
to do, so they've been binge watching it.
no kidding.
Flipping back a little bit, let's dial back the calendar. We filmed our episode. I think we established right before the bye week, just before
Yeah.
the All Star game, I believe, and we, like I mentioned in the top here, we were going to do a show. You had gone out to Lake Minnewanka like the week before, and you just had these amazing photos of you on this glass lake, and I was like, oh, I want to go there, and I want to shoot a season there or a show there. And I think I went down there. I texted you. You were like, yeah, let's do it. So I was like, sweet. And then yeah, it snowed like a foot. We get out there, and it's just
Yeah.
like completely covered. But we still made it out and made an episode of it. What I bet you're just longing to get out there at this point, being trapped inside this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, when this whole thing started, you kind of figured, well, at least we have that, right? We can kind of go and take a few trips around the mountains, and I mean, on the surface, it seems like a good idea, right? There's nobody out there most of the time, especially in the area where we shot. So that's what I was looking forward to right away. I said, well, I'm kind of an outdoorsy guy. Maybe there's a chance to go out there and shoot some video, take some photos, go for some walks. And then obviously the parks are now closed too, which, I mean, I don't disagree with any of this. It just makes you long for it a little bit more because it is such a beautiful time of year. And we got lucky. Like, that was an awesome place to set up shop and shoot. I mean, Rundle Mountain, I think when we were setting up, we were like, there were probably 5 or 10 photographers there. And we're like,
That's
are we
right.
getting in their shot? And we're like, well, too bad.
Yeah.
They're getting in our shot, right? So it's so amazing. So yeah, and in the summertime too, that's hopefully in a couple of weeks, months, we might be able to get back out there because Rundle Mountain in the background, you get that thing at sunrise and sunset. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, I think the expression I used was Photoshop. You were like,
oh yeah,
I think they're going to be in their shot, and I was like, Photoshop. They can just magic brush us out of there.
Yeah, we're used to it by now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that was a great time out on the lake. That was made for a wicked episode. Let's after that, the season kind of progressed. We had some pretty good Battle of Alberta highlights, but let's dial back to March 11th. Now the Flames didn't play. I think you guys were in the middle of a 3-day break, and I believe the Islanders were in town on their Western Canadian swing, and we're ready to play you guys on a Thursday, I think. And
yep, that's right.
The NBA announced their postponement Wednesday night. So what was it like for you and the Flames not playing a game at wherever you were, watching things unfold? And obviously there was probably a lot of chatter going on. What was kind of the vibe and what was unfolding down in Calgary?
I mean, you're right. I think the first thing I thought of it feels like even more of a lifetime ago that we played because, like you said, that was Wednesday, March 11th that all that went down, and our previous game was on Sunday against the Golden Knights, which was actually a kind of a heartbreaking loss, a last-minute goal by Shea Theodore to win it after coming back from 3 down. But all that doesn't matter. We don't remember that game, right? But
yeah,
going into Thursday, kind of similar to what Tom said. It was sort of the first day where those new protocols were fully in place. And I think as an organization, we were one of the first teams that really enacted the distancing protocol in the sense that we weren't allowed in the locker room. So we actually were out of the locker room beginning on, I think it was the Saturday. So before that game against the Golden Knights. But that Wednesday was the first day where a proper podium was set up. There were literally lines painted on the floor saying you can't cross this. And in advance of Thursday's game, the New York Islanders were going to use that for their morning skate availabilities as well as post game. So it really did change everything of what we were looking at. But we covered practice that day as normal as we could. Obviously, I went home and started working on my game preview for the following day, which was really good. It's too bad it didn't see the light of the day, but we were. I was watching the Oilers and Jets game, kind of like everybody, because it was sort of the marquee match of the night. Playoff implications had a lot to do with the Flames too. But I'm big on the Twitter. I don't think I'm ever off it. So I saw those tweets come down, and as soon as the game was delayed because the doctors had run on the floor, and then all of a sudden, I think it was about a half hour later, they say, yeah, Rudy Gobert is tested positive. And at that point, sinking feeling you get in your stomach. I knew right away it was over for some time. We still don't know the scale of it, but it was going to be a while. So those tweets go down. We sort of expected that the NHL might do something that night, so we got ready in case there was a press release of some sort. Got on the horn with my boss to talk about various things, but once we knew that there was going to be no statement that night and that it was going to pour into Thursday somehow, we had a pretty good just feeling that game wasn't going to play out anyway. So I told my boss, I'm somebody who's immunocompromised. So I told my boss, we're probably not playing. I'm going to stay home just, out of an abundance of caution, that being a good idea. We did, as an organization, hold a press conference that day just to sort of give, some initial thoughts on what the plans were going to be. But I was able to handle the live streams from my home setup here and wrote a story off it. And I think it was that day or the day after that we announced that it was paused officially for some time. So now we're just trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah, totally. I think not only the hockey, I think the whole world is obviously trying to figure it out. So that's, kind of speaks to the gravity of the issue. So Yeah, so I mean, most all of us are kind of in self-isolation, kind of waiting to see how this thing unfolds. Like for myself, my day job, I'm with the government of Alberta, so I'm at every press conference that they have. So for me, it's kind of business as usual, but for everybody else, they're kind of stuck at home and waiting, and we'll see what unfolds. Folds. The Flames have had a really interesting season. It's hard to look back because it feels like ages ago, but there's been a lot of big topics have come. You've gone through. The team has kind of go through its ebbs and flows. But the one thing that has completely rocketed up the rankings is the Battle of Alberta. And I just want to get your thoughts on the battle because you were born and raised in Calgary. And obviously, I was born and raised in Edmonton. So obviously, we have childhood favoritism towards those teams. And we kind of remember those battles of Alberta's that were legendary. And I think this year, there was definitely a page turning. There's always this chatter about, oh, it's the Battle of Alberta. Every game means a lot, and it does. But I think this year was another level. And I think both teams could have claimed bragging rights. Like I mentioned to you earlier today, that there was the stick flip in Edmonton that as a sports fan, I thought that was awesome because it was just like awesome. It was just if an Oiler player did that in Calgary, I would have lost my mind. It would have been really cool. So that was really cool to watch. And then on the flip side, they go into Calgary and then just absolutely they chase him from the net, they cream him. So both sides of the Battle of Alberta have kind of bragging rights to certain parts of the season, but working for the Flames, how's it unfolded in front of you? It must be pretty cool to watch.
I mean, as a fan, that last game at the Saddle, I mean, first of all, I mean, that from a Flames perspective, not the result on the scoreboard you're looking for.
No, no.
And certainly the players were, I mean, they were embarrassed after that one. That was the word they used. But,
Yeah.
As somebody who, isn't necessarily in the dressing room in those moments, and I'm up in the press box, I mean, that was pure theater. I mean, that second period was off the rails. And when they decided to, I think they called it a few minutes or seconds early, right? So they could kind of figure out the penalty situation before starting the third period.
Yeah.
The buzz in that building, I mean, that topped, I hesitate to say a playoff game because that's a fairly high level, but it was pretty incredible. And, when Cam Talbot and Mike Smith stepped into center ice there, that just, I mean, that's the season highlight for me. But that, for both sides, right? That kind of says exactly where this rivalry went. And at the start of the year, we really lamented the fact that we weren't going to meet each other for the first time until late December. It seemed like such a oversight by the NHL to schedule it that way. But, what enabled the Battle of Alberta in every game so far to be so good was the fact that the games had meaning for the first time in a while. So we were already deep into the season and the teams were battling for first place. There's actually something on the line for the first time in, I mean, however many years, right? So I don't think stepping into that first game or the last game that we saw here at the Saddle Dome, the teams necessarily set out to say, I hate these guys. But that's a natural byproduct when you're battling for first place. And that there's a very real possibility that you're going to see these guys in the first round. So I'm not necessarily a believer in tone setting per se, but I do believe that some of that was happening because the game's evolved, right? But there is legitimately a mutual disdain for these two teams. And it's a real shame we didn't get to see what would have been a pretty entertaining regular season finale this weekend. But let's hold out hope that we might get it again. Let's hope, right?
Absolutely. You're right. It really set the stage for some really cool last week of the regular season for sure. But yeah, back to the goalie fight. When Smith went to the red line, like I didn't get to know Smith because obviously he wasn't on the team when I worked there. But I got to know Talbot pretty good. He's a pretty even keel guy. He's not super loud. He kind of goes about his business. He's a dad. He and I kind of talked about when his twins were born in New York. We talked about what it's like being in because those were his first kids, and at that time I had three. So getting to know him, pretty even keel guy. Never in a million years would I thought I would see him fight. But when Smith went to the line and Talbot went out, like there's stories of people in bars and restaurants that like stopped and looked at the screen because it was about to go down. And I didn't know, and maybe you didn't know either. That was the first goalie fight in the Battle of Alberta, which is hard to fathom with all the stuff that we've seen.
It's crazy, right? And obviously I'm going to look at this a little bit through Flames glasses, but I have all the respect and admiration in the world for Cam Talbot of taking that fight on, because let's get this clear. Mike Smith is kind of a beast. There isn't a goalie in the NHL that I think would win that fight. And Cam's not a huge guy, right? So in a goalie fight, especially if you don't have that reach advantage, you're in a tough spot. So it was funny that like the next day we talked about a post game, and we obviously talked to him the next day at practice too. Cam had a few laughs about it. He's like, "Oh yeah, I knew I was losing that fight as soon as I went in there." But there was a little bit. Again, it wasn't something that I think either side planned. I think Mike Smith probably wanted to have that happen a little bit more, but
because he knew he was going to win.
Well, that doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
But it was a point in the game too where Flames weren't playing all that well. Talbot came in relief in that game and was under siege in that period. I think he faced 20 some odd shots. So that's a lot for 17 minutes of work. And then in the process, that final save that he makes, he covers it up and he gets a poke from, I think it was Gagne there. So just one of those things that just happens organically. And, he may not have won the fight against Mike Smith, but he caught a couple of good blocker shots in on Gagne. So I guess he left happy.
Well, and hey, like I've played junior B hockey, obviously, believe it or not, Dittrick, but I am not in an enforcer role.
It shocks me.
I know. But when guys that aren't pegged as the enforcers or the energy guys, when those guys, like even Sam Gagne, I think, I don't know if it was the previous Flames game or a game before, or Nuge got in a fight. And when a guy like that drops the mitts, everybody just is like, oh my God, they're fighting. And I think the same thing happened with Talbot. I think Flames fans were like his stature just went like because he's a nice guy, but obviously, he was willing to kind of pay the price, so to speak. And I can only imagine the Flames fans would probably went nuts, even if he lost or drew the fight. I'm sure that that just added to Talbot's reputation there for sure.
And you know what? For both guys too, that's we've talked about the stories about how there's been a couple of guys on either side that have swapped colors this year. Smith, Lucic, Neil, Talbot, all those guys, right? And there's actually some more if you date it back even further.
Yep.
I think a lot of people don't really understand how difficult that is, especially in a rivalry like this. I know we talked to Lucic about it quite a bit, and he wasn't. You've seen Milan Lucic. He's willing to. He's probably one of the most candid interviews that there is in this league. He wasn't afraid to admit the fact that he still has friends on the other side. So that's tough to put aside. And what is considered probably one of the most storied rivalries, or certainly here in Western Canada in the NHL. And to be looking down the barrel of the team that you once represented. So I'm not sure what goes into that mentally and how they're able to overcome that. But yeah, you're right. When a guy steps up in that situation and does it, he's automatically endeared to both the fan base and the locker room. Yeah.
And I think even Oilers fans, I think because Talbot was a former Oiler, it was just, I think that's what made it more legendary. It was just two former goalies swapping sides, fighting. It was just, it's too bad we don't have that final game at the end of the year to add to the chapter, because God knows what would happen.
Yeah, no kidding. It'd be insane.
Yeah. Let's turn the page a little bit. When I built the studio, you used to, for fans watching, you used to work for the Oilers before heading off to the Jets and then winding up with the Calgary Flames. And you spent a lot of time in Rexall, as did I. And they put all the seats in the stadium up for sale. So I originally passed on the idea, but I wound up buying a couple, mainly because when I was brainstorming the second season of this series, I thought, what better way to interview people than to actually have them sit in a seat from Rexall, which is pretty cool. Now I know via Twitter and Instagram that you bought some seats yourself. Where are they, and have you done anything with them?
Well, they're actually in my garden shed at the moment, but the only reason they're there, and they will be inside soon. The reason they're in there, I had a pretty busy summer last summer, but so I moved again. That's kind of what I do. But anyway, you would know this as well. You've got to clean them out real good.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't want to bring them into the house until that was done. I did purchase a pretty cool steaming device off Amazon, which is, literally 3 feet from me right now, still in its box. So I'm ready to get that done as soon as the weather turns a little bit.
Nice.
And it's going to be coming into, I haven't really decided whether it's going to be in my studio or in my kind of my TV watching room. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. All I knew is as soon as I saw that happen, I just knew I had to have them. I spent so many hours in Rexall.
Yeah.
The building saw, reach the end of its lifespan, but I loved everything about that building. I loved working there. Growing up, I lived in Calgary, but I would often drive up to see games and would be in there as soon as the doors opened. So, that building meant a lot to me personally, and to actually have a physical piece of it, that's pretty cool, along with memories.
Yeah, definitely clean them. On my Instagram stories, I kind of chronicled me cleaning these things, and I have the same. I have like a steam water cleaner thingy, and I think I did 4 or 5 passes on these cushions. You just like they're the original seats in the upper bowl. They're just gross. But when you do it, remember take some pictures on Instagram, because if you pop the seat cushions off, which is really easy to do. To be able to do a deep clean, you pop the cushions off, steam clean them, put them back in. Super easy to do. But sometimes there's things that kind of fall in. 99.8% is absolutely disgusting things. You want to use a vacuum to suck all of that up. But in my seats, I actually had 50-50 ticket stubs from the CFR, which, as you know, used to inhabit that rink for like almost 2 weeks while the team was on the road. So I think they were back from 2001. So you never know. Maybe there's a ticket stub from the 1980s in there. So keep an eye out for that.
I did pop one of them off in the summer. The second one yet to be revealed. But yeah, I maybe that's why I didn't open the second one yet. The first one sort of scared me off for a few months. But yeah, I found an old 50-50 in there too. It wasn't from an Oilers game. I can't remember what it was for, but it's kind of cool to see that time in the past. So yeah, I get it. People are wedging whatever they have in their pockets in there at the time.
Yeah. You have every right to be scared, especially with COVID-19 going on. Like God knows, you don't want to reveal another virus. We'll get to some fan questions before I let you go. I'll ask the same question I asked Tom from Fraser F. Neek on Instagram. He asked a favorite road story. So do you have a favorite road story or a one?
Yeah, I have a couple, but I'm sort of offended actually that Tom didn't remember that I was there that night at Messier's, but that's okay. I'll forgive him for that one. But he provided many more details than I'm able to remember from that night. I remember 2 things. I remember, he's totally right about the cabs. I remember sharing a cab with Derek Laxdal. It was just me and him, who was the coach of the Edmonton Oil Kings at the time. He now coaches the Texas Stars of the American Hockey League.
Yep.
So we had a nice little conversation there. And then the other thing I remember is that we had a really early morning meeting at the NHL head office the next day. In between, apparently some fun was had. I don't know.
That never happens in New York.
No,
come on.
No. Not my favorite story, though.
Oh, okay. Hit me with your good one there.
Sorry. I actually got a couple, but go in a little bit of a different direction. It was actually something that I think I thought a little bit about going through this time that we're going through now. So bit of a news hound to my detriment. I probably should be watching a little bit less of that nowadays. Just overconsumption of that's not what you need. Nevertheless, seeing some of the images out of New York City is pretty crazy. Streets are mostly empty and things like that, which is, I mean, you never see that in a city like that. But I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago. I was on a road trip when I was with the Jets, and kind of a rare setup there. Every year that I was with the Jets, we never actually knocked off all the New York teams at once. We always did 2 trips to New York a year for whatever reason. So on this particular one, we started in Nashville, and then the following night it was a back-to-back game against the Devils. Then we had a day off, and then we'd play the Islanders at Barclays Center in Brooklyn. But when we got to Jersey after that game in Nashville, the weather was terrible. So it was this giant snowstorm, and all of a sudden around noon, when we would normally be getting our pregame stuff ready for that night, they announced that the game was postponed. So we ended up actually having a third trip to the New York area later that month. Nevertheless, the game was postponed. This blizzard's happening. After the game in New Jersey, we were going to bus it over to Manhattan, where we would stay in preparation for the following day's practice and then the game against the Islanders. We just decided to expedite that and get over to Manhattan right away and kind of shack up before, maybe end of the road shut down, things like that. So what was nuts about that is we've seen nowadays the streets of New York are empty, but they're not totally empty. I remember that day in New York City, though. We went from Jersey City, which is just across the Hudson River, went through the Holland Tunnel into Midtown, and then we had a hotel in the financial district in Lower Manhattan. It was absolutely insane. We didn't see one car or one person the entire way. And this is New York City. It was mind-blowing to me. So we get to our hotel, and I decided, it was a snowstorm, but frankly, here in Canada, we've seen enough of those. It really didn't seem that bad to us. I decided to go for a bit of a walk. The weather wasn't pleasant, but it was good enough to kind of get around on foot. And our hotel was right near the World Trade Center. So I walked across the West Side Highway, walked around the World Trade Center, kind of looked around a little bit. I was literally standing on the busiest, or one of the busiest roads in Manhattan, and there's nobody around, not one car.
Wow.
So I go over to the World Trade Center. I snap a few photos with my phone, and my one regret is I didn't bring my DSLR, because I could have got some insane photographs. But
Right.
Nevertheless, went over to the 9/11 memorial and actually had a moment to myself, which was pretty powerful. And on the way back, I talked to a few police officers, and they were just kind of joking. They said they've never in their life seen literally not one person out there. So to me, that was just mind blowing. It's unfortunately more memory at this point than anything, because I didn't have my camera with me. But man, even now, where the city is essentially on lockdown, you're still not quite getting that exact same feel. And fortunately, with that snowstorm, everybody was safe. So I can look back on that memory as being a pretty fond experience. The second one, believe it or not, kind of weather related as well, and it goes back to Oklahoma City. I was covering the 2013 Barons playoff run all the way through. So we would stay in Oklahoma City and travel to their road cities, kind of home base in OKC, for as long as they were in the playoffs. Can't remember. I think this is the second round, but it was big time tornado season, as it tends to be down there in May.
Yep.
So this is late May at this point. We were getting set to play the game. We knew all day that tornadoes were a possibility. They actually said it could be one of the most dangerous days of the year. So we were prepared. We knew what evacuation procedures would be in place and things like that. It gets time for warm-up. Warm-up's delayed because there's this tornado forming a little bit west of town, and it looks to be pretty dangerous. 15 minutes later, they tell us they're evacuating everybody in the Arena Bowl, and the game's postponed. So that tornado, by the way, it's known as the El Reno tornado, still the biggest in North American history, I believe, 2.5 miles wide.
Wow.
So it was absolutely insane. So what they did is they sent us, ice level was street level, but they sent all the fans, staff, players who were half dressed, literally in their hockey gear, all down to the underground parking garage. And we were getting, following it as best we could on Twitter at the time, and tornado was heading right for downtown. And fortunately, right at kind of the last second, it hooked south, missed the city, and didn't take out any urban areas, which was awesome. But after we knew it was safe, we came back upstairs to the arena level. It was still a pretty bad storm outside. I grabbed my camera and started shooting because the rink was flooding. So from all four corners, water was pouring in. It was going down the stairwells of the upper bowl like a river. Everybody's running to get electrical gear out. The Barons locker room was totally, like, the ceiling had collapsed. It was just crazy. So one of those nights that you, without a doubt, remember for the rest of your life. And I should note too, while we were down there in the parking garage, the power went out at 1 point too, so it was pure darkness.
Wow.
So crazy night. And funnily enough, I was there with Mark Ciampa, who now, he was your boss at the time. He now runs the digital department in New Jersey.
Yep.
We had a gentleman by the name of Carter Baum, who was an intern with the Barons, stay in our hotel room that night because he didn't, it wasn't safe to drive home at that point. He's now the content manager with the Chicago Blackhawks, so it's kind of funny how it all comes full circle a little bit. But those two, just, we look back at this period of time as being something we're going to remember for the rest of our lives. And I look back at those two events as being the same. And it's funny how it has nothing to do with hockey, but it has everything to do with unity, right?
Right. Yeah, totally. That's insane. The only close to that scenario on the road for me was we got iced in Buffalo. We finished the game, ran out to the airport, and it was freezing rain. We barely got out to the airport, and they canceled the flight. So we went back to the hotel, stayed the night actually in the Flames. I think the Flames were actually supposed to be flying in that night. We took all their rooms, and then the next morning we got up, went to the plane, and yeah, I mean, I'm glad we didn't take off because the entire plane had icicles hanging on it. Like it was almost like a comic. Like you had this huge plane, the charter, and it was just literally caked in ice. And that's nowhere near those crazy stories, but that was the only time when we were on the road and that happened. So, well, Deech, thanks for coming on. Thanks again for being a good sport, filming that episode out in Banff. It was a really cool episode. I had a lot of good feedback of how it looked, and it's funny when you look at the episode, you look at the progression. It got darker and darker and darker. So I think the exposure kind of like varied in multiple shots, but hey, it turned out really well, and wish you the best of luck moving forward, and hopefully we get back to some sort of hockey in the near future. So, but thanks for coming on, bud.
Yeah, you bet, Nasher. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks.